This is the High School Crossfire. Welcome back.
Resolved. Which companies have addressed an oil spill in Uganda, if not the government?
Is that a yes or no question?
Okay. Should the oil spill contingency plan by the government be removed? Yes or no?
No.
It shouldn't be removed, so we need collaborative approach. Is it justifiable for a company to be held accountable for an oil spill that occurred due to a natural disaster like an earthquake?
I beg your pardon?
Is it justifiable for a company to be held accountable for an oil spill that occurred due to natural disasters like an earthquake?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that if collaboration between the government and companies in the oil and gas sector is made stronger, we can easily address the problem in the status quo?
No.
You can't. Is the government responsible for environmental conservation? Yes or no?
It's not.
It is not. Okay. Are you aware that the more duties, the more payment? Yes or no?
No.
Oh no. If there are oil spills in Uganda, and then these companies have been in place, have they done anything? Have they?
They have.
Oh, okay. Yet you didn't mention any company. What would you prefer to work? Would you prefer to work with someone, or would you prefer to work alone?
I prefer to work alone.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You may have your seat. Dear panel, we have heard. They have said that the government is not responsible for conserving the environment, yet we all know that the government of Uganda is responsible for conserving the environment of Uganda. Dear panel, they have failed to answer questions like, they have failed to answer questions that if there is an oil spill due to a natural disaster, is the company supposed to be held accountable? And dear panel, their answers are like yes. So if at all they are saying that it is due to negligence, as their first speaker said, then how am I negligent on an earthquake that occurred? How am I supposed to be held accountable simply because there was an earthquake in Kampala whereby the oil pipeline was passing? Dear panel, due to what they have answered, it shows that they are not able to win the debate simply because they have failed to prove the fact that these companies having the sole responsibility to address oil spills and environmental disaster in the oil and gas sector can stand on their own. So, dear panel, I would like to leave them this question. Maybe they will come and answer them that is an oil spill due to natural disaster? Is it due to negligence? And if it is not due to negligence, what should we do for it? If at all they are saying that they are going to hold these people accountable simply because they were negligent, and then this oil spill was due to natural disasters, which is not someone's negligence. So what should we do for that? Dear panel, we talked about things like the oil spill contingency plan, and dear panel, they're saying that it should be removed. This is a plan that is standing to help conserve the environment and to help address issues like these oil spills and environmental disasters. So dear panel, simply because these people have failed to solve the problem in the status quo, that is oil spills and environmental disasters, dear panel, they cannot stand to win the debate. And we are still negative, stand to win the debate simply because we have brought the reasons as to why we have to go with a collaborative approach. I rest my case.
However far a man wants to throw his urine, it will always come back to his feet. Resolved. Responsibility of addressing oil spills and environmental disasters in oil and gas sector should rest solely on the companies involved. I based my questions on the following, and I require a yes or no. Do you understand? Are you aware that by the time the government mandates a company to operate, it means that that company has the expertise to clean up their mess?
With the provided...
I said yes or no.
Yes, with the provided things.
Yes, I said yes or no. Follow instructions. If other bodies are held responsible for the oil spills and environmental disasters associated in the oil and gas sector, other than companies involved, is it creating a sense of responsibility in these companies responsible? Yes or no?
I beg your pardon.
If other bodies are held responsible for the oil spills and environmental disasters in the oil and gas sector, other than companies involved, is it creating a sense of responsibility in the companies involved?
Simply because you
I said yes or no.
Yes, it is.
Now rest. Are you aware that the government has other sectors to prioritize on, such as the health sector and agriculture sector?
Yes, it has other sectors.
I said yes. Rest. Are you aware that Uganda, as a third world country, runs on a narrow budget funded by majorly external borrowing?
Yes, it does.
If yes, are you aware that spending on oil spills and environmental disasters, when we have profit, when we have companies making profits in our country, is expanding the country's expenditure?
Because we are expecting profit.
I said yes or no.
We are expecting profit.
Oh, okay. Are you aware that involving the government pushes the burden to taxpayers?
No.
Naive. Rest and be educated, young man. Now, what Team Negative has failed to understand is the motion. They actually misinterpret the motion. The motion states that the responsibility of addressing oil spills and environmental disasters in oil and gas sector rests solely in the companies involved. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not saying that we are going to give them 100% occupation in our country. First of all, for us to mandate a country, they have to sign a contract. Now, our condition is they should be responsible solely for oil spills and solely for oil spills and environmental disasters associated. Then that was for question 1. Then for question 2, I asked them if other bodies are held responsible for oil spills and environmental disasters in the oil and gas sector, other than companies involved, is it creating a sense of responsibility? Of course, they said no. Ladies and gentlemen, if there are other bodies involved in the oil and gas sector of our country, these countries coming from abroad actually will they will not be able to address these issues because the burden is lifted off them. They need to be responsible for their actions if they are going to make profits in our country. And then I asked them a third question: are you aware that the government has other sectors to prioritize on, such as the health sector and the agriculture sector? And they said yes. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, let me inform you that Uganda has other sectors. For example, the agriculture sector, which is currently our backbone. The backbone of our economies, and basically it's actually struggling. So why should we spend more money solving issues of companies that are making profits in our country, yet they have the capability of addressing these issues? We need to prioritize this. Ladies and gentlemen, again I asked them a question where they are aware that Uganda is a third world country and it runs on a budget funded by external borrowing. Ladies and gentlemen, where shall we get the money? Ladies and gentlemen, we say that we are a supervisory body of NEMA and we are going to ensure that these companies are solely responsible. No, we are not giving them 100%. With this, I rest my case.
On substantive points of adjudication, Team Affirmative's burden today was to prove to us that addressing oil spills and environmental disasters should rest solely with companies involved. In what way possible? You are supposed to answer the how question, the why question, where question, and when. When I mean in what circumstances. Where I mean what sorts of things will you do. Why are you assigning that burden? And how will you apportion that burden? I felt like on the how burden, you substantively gave us the best case, because you gave us an involvement where government just uses its overbearing ability through its arms such as courts of law and parliament to make sure that these companies bear responsibility. I believe that's where Team Negative didn't get you. Team Negative, Team Affirmative's case was not that government should just sit back and let the companies do everything. Their definition of responsibility rested solely with bearing of consequences, both 1, monetary, 2, which they defined as compensation to the people, 3, which they defined as making sure that they do a cleanup. I liked the second affirmative speech because he expounded on the how question and the why question. Now came to where team affirmative, you had done something that no one had noticed till team negative called it out. They tell you that, why don't you tell us which companies you're going to involve in this case? In other words, if it is a collaborative approach between companies and government, these companies are going to come in and have an assisting hand from government. But if it's only a company-based approach, you are going to see that the overbearing effect will be on the consumer. In other words, when you bring up the question of when oil spill burdens are borne primarily by those companies, we will save government revenue. But they tell you that you inadvertently affect the government itself because they are going to overcharge and exploit your citizen in a bid to compensate.
Thank you. To begin with, appreciation to the first speaker on team affirmative and the first speaker from team negative. I thank you and I commend you for the job well done. You really understood the roles and you really understood what the first speakers are meant to do when it talks about introduction of your case. Now, ladies and gentlemen, today's resolution, we had a team affirmative that was looking at putting solely the blame on the oil and gas companies. Why? Because by virtue that these are profit maximizing companies, it means they have the ability, they have the capability, and they have the expertise to meet the costs involved. However much, yes, we also had a team negative that was saying, no, why shouldn't we have a collaborative approach where we should not only look at the companies, but also the government should intervene. Why? Despite the fact that these are profit maximizing companies, don't you think that when the burden is put onto them, there is now going to be a high cost in production, and at the end of the day, it is the people that are going to be affected, which both alternatives and both arguments were right. But now, where did they base on my argument? To begin with, Team Affirmative talked about the point of profit maximization since they talked about the ability, capability, and expertise. Then, at the beginning, they also talked about the solely or the responsibility resting on the companies because they have the moral and logical obligation enthroned onto them. Then they also talked about the need to save the government from necessarily just looking at one ministry and investing more money in other ministries. And then we had a team negative that looked at a collaborative approach where the government is working hand in hand with the people and the companies. They also say that we are advocating for this because, one, we are advocating for independence of African states, and we are advocating for the fight against neocolonialism on grounds that most of the companies that we are having of late are owned by foreigners, meaning if we just restrict them to control everything, we are going to have a profit repatriation.
I'll pick up from where Judge Solomon left it. Now, let me pick out a word that I felt was so important and essential to this case, and how both teams understood it or took advantage of it. Now, there is a word solely in this resolution. Now, Team Affirmative, your first speaker was exceptional in presenting your work plan and showing us your case. And throughout your case as Team Affirmative, you brought out a major point of, one, which I actually noted, reducing this burden on the government. I credited you for that point. But now, you leaving out the word solely or not clearly defining it, left an opening for team negative, which they came and built on and said, for us as team negative, we are looking at solely as entirely putting that responsibility on these companies. Meaning, if these companies have to address the spills and all these leakages and the incidents that come from that, you are saying it is entirely up to them to carry out what is required in form of compensation and dealing with the spills. Meaning the companies get to choose not just to do that, but how they do it. Altogether, the question of what means are these companies going to use, and they are saying, by virtue of these companies being private, one, we're going to have issues of the environment being affected. They're raising the point of the wildlife because you have failed to define the wild solely, and they're saying in solely you're leaving it to the companies to choose how they actually deal with these spills. Are you sure that the companies will have the interests of both the environment, the people, and the wildlife at hand? Are we together? Next question where I actually based my judgment similarly. They point out to you that these spills are actually not only caused by mismanagement, they're equally caused by natural disasters. And one of your speakers actually came and conceded to it and said, yes, we accept that natural disasters also cause spills. So now, how are you going to address that? Is it still the responsibility of the companies to address that? I did not hear anything from Team Affirmative to address that question.
Now, most of the things have been mentioned by the judges, so I'm going to be direct on my deciding factors. My deciding factors were your failure as Team Affirmative to stand by the parameter you set. You set your perimeter as Uganda. They came and set a perimeter as East Africa, and you did not say anything about that from the second speaker to the fourth speaker. Team Affirmative, it is your role to set the perimeter, but if Team Negative comes up and rebuts that perimeter, you're supposed to defend your perimeter the same way you were defending the rest of your what? Of your arguments. The other deciding factor were the questions that were left unanswered. Team Negative asked you, what happens? I looked at your work plan. Your work plan was very beautiful in a way of holding companies liable for the spillages. However, they asked you, what happens? Because you said you're going to hold them solely responsible. They asked you, now what happens when the companies refuse to be held responsible? Yes, an oil spillage has happened, but the company has said, we are not going to be able to compensate these people. We are not going to do it. And you actually had this in your work plan. You had licensing, you had monitoring, you had strict laws, you had punishment, but none of you, if you put out information and you actually do not mention it, and you actually do not rebut, I can't hold them liable, because it is your role to use that information to defend your case. You actually had the defenses in your case, but you did not rebut that. They asked you, yes, there are two types of things that could happen. They are caused by natural calamities and then also mismanagement. For the case of natural calamities, you did not rebut it. It is the third speaker that came up and said, for the case of natural calamities, you said, for the case of natural calamities, the companies are the biggest benefactors of this, so we should hold them liable. You could imagine that was your biggest defense that you could offer. Second of all, they asked you what companies are to be held liable. You did not answer that. After that, they asked you, they told you actually companies do not, a company, an independent private body, does not have the country's interests at heart. What happens to the environment? What happens to the climate? You did not answer that. I'm not trying to say your case was totally empty. What I'm trying to say is that you had the tools at hand, but you were not able to use them. Even the other questions that they asked you, in your entire strategy, you were not flexible enough to answer that. Anyway, for style, I gave both of you 14. Content, I gave you 20. Strategy, I gave Team Affirmative 25 and Team Negative 28. Totaling up to 62 for Team Affirmative and 59 for, totaling up to 62 for Team Negative and 59 for Team Affirmative.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be brief. First and foremost, I want to appreciate first a farmer, first negator. I see people making parliamentarians in future, yes? That is a prophecy. First a farmer, thank you so much for bringing the acts. I started enjoying the way you're bringing the acts, bringing the articles in the Constitution, mentioning them. But at the end of the day, as judges, we sit down and come to a conclusion to have a deciding factor on who had the better argument against the other. Team affirmative, you have the burden of proof as the government. Team negators, their role is just to rebut whatever you're saying because they feel they are not appreciated enough. Because of a lot of questions that personally I felt were not answered, which I want to credit team negators. Why? Because from the start, they never swerved from the main point. However, team affirmative had a strategy that could kill anything that comes around. But the moment they mention one, as much as I'm crediting the first affirmer, I told us the first work of a first affirmer is to define some keywords in that what? Resolution. You don't leave it for your second speaker to come and do it. If at all you could have defined the part of soul, trust me, a twist of fate could start from there. But it does the question your second speaker is speaking, instead of answering it, she picks it up and says, my third speaker will talk about it. When it comes to style, I was persuaded by all both teams because you had a 15, all of you. But an advice to the fourth affirmer, yes, you're good. Your kind of question approach was good. But this is a honorable house. You don't call people young man. Young man, leave it for deputy principals and teachers on duties. In content, team affirmative, you have 25. Team negators, you have 23. I was not persuaded by your content. Your argument, yes, okay, but your content. In strategy, team affirmative, you have 25%. Team negators, you have 30%. Totaling up to a 65% for team affirmative and a 68% for team negators. Before you clap now, let me base my last argument in this. The natural disaster part of it was a pinpoint to kill the team affirmative, which I expected a clash point from the third speaker. I rest my cases of this. It's not a unanimous judgment, it's 4 against 1. Team affirmative has 64%. Team negators have a 66%. So of this, the team negators take the day. God bless you.